Hi everybody, my name's Aaron, and I'm going to show you today how to sign up for a Capella trial account so you can use that to test app services with some applications we've built to show off converting from MongoDB Atlas to Couchbase Capella using app services. Let's get started. So over here, we're at cloud.couchbase.com. When you go to cloud.couchbase.com, it'll automatically take to a URL called sign-in. From the sign-in page, we're going to click on the link here that says try for free. And we try for free, it's going to give us a couple different options. I'm going to use my Google account for this. You can sign up with your own email address, username, and password if you want, but I like the Google integration, so I'm going to just pick my email account here. I'm going to use that. You can see here, it's going to ask me for some code information here. I will pause this so that you don't see that, and then we'll get right back to this. I got to get that code off my phone. And you can see here that now that I've signed in with that code, it's asking, hey, are you sure you want to share this information? I'm going to go ahead and do this. Once again, you don't have to use your Gmail account. You could use GitHub, or you could use pretty much anything else. And you can see here, I'm signed in already. I'm up and running. You can see here, I've got my account. I've got all kinds of links here and things I can do. But today I want to go through and create a cluster. So you can see here, I can create one new free cluster. So I'm going to click on the create cluster button. You can see I'm going to select my first project for that, and I'm going to click continue. Now you can see here, I'm going to use single node, which is, our free right here, this free environment, right? And the cluster detail, I'm going to just call this whatever I want, right? So for the cluster, I'm just going to call this to-do. And my description is going to be a cluster for my mobile apps. Now, the next thing is your cloud provider. Now, this is all up to what you want to deploy out to. You can deploy out to AWS, which is super popular. You can deploy out to Microsoft Azure, which is also popular with .NET developers and any Microsoft customers. And then, of course, Google Cloud. For sake of simplicity, I'm going to go through and use AWS. The regions that are available for this are obviously we have in the US, Ohio, and US East, Europe for Ireland, and in Asia Pacific, we've got Singapore. I'm in the US here, so I'm going to just use US East for that. You can see here, I can change my CIDR block if I want. These are the IP addresses that the cluster will use by default. This is giving me a /24, which means all IP addresses on 10.0.0.0 through 10.0.0.254 are available. I'm going to go ahead and go through and create this cluster to create this free cluster. Now, when you create a cluster, it does take a few moments. So I'm going to go ahead and just fast forward ahead while this cluster is getting created. And we'll get back here in a couple minutes when it's up and running. And we're back. And like that, my cluster is created. We're going to go through now from the operational cluster screen and click on the to-do cluster. Now we're in our cluster, we can see here that we have a screen that shows us our to-do cluster. It's healthy. We can see that the services are running on it. We see this app services. But before we want to go through and set up app services, we want to create a bucket. A bucket's a storage. Think of it like a bucket inside of AWS S3. You can think of it as very similar to the buckets or kind of storage that MongoDB has. But when it comes down to it, it's just a storage container that you can store documents in. So to do that, we're going to click on the Data Tools tab here. And from here, we're just going to click this Create. You can see here, it's giving us a screen for creating a bucket, scope, and collection. I'm going to go through and select New Bucket. And in our bucket here, we're just going to call this To-Do lowercase. The amount of memory, 100 megabits is more than enough for this, but I'm going to go through and actually change this to be 512. And you can see here I have 1347 available. 512 for our demoing honestly is, actually let's make this 256. We'll never have any more than that. So then in here, we want to go through and select a scope. A scope's like a namespace. Okay, so a scope can have a bunch of collections inside of it, and collections work very similar to how collections work inside of MongoDB. For our scope, we're just going to call this data, and that's where we're going to store our data. We can have multiple scopes if we want. We can have, in each scope, we can have multiple collections. In our collections, we're going to go through and we're going to call that tasks. So we're going to click on the new collection name box here, type in tasks, and this should create us a new bucket called to do with a new scope of data and a new collection called tasks. Now that we have our to-do bucket set up with our data scope and our task collection, we can go through and set up an app services trial. To do that, I'm going to click the home button here again. And you can see here from our main home screen, there's this option here that says try app services, deploy app services. I'm going to go ahead and click that. You can see here it takes me to the app services tab, and from there I can click this button that says create app service. For my app service name, I can name this anything I want. I can just going to call this ToDo App Service. And then for my link cluster, I'm going to link this to my ToDo cluster. You can see here, this is all I should need to be able to do. This is free on our free tier, and we can click the create app services bucket. Once I click create, this will also take several minutes to deploy. So I'll go through and speed ahead, and I'll meet you when it's done deploying. And like that, my app service is spun up and ready and healthy. I'm going to go ahead to the next step to build an app endpoint. To do this, I'm going to click on my ToDo app service that's now healthy. This should bring up the app endpoint screen. Now you can see here, the app endpoints, there's nothing listed. So we're going to go ahead and click the create app endpoint button to create a new app endpoint. Now here, this is where we get interesting. We need to make sure that we keep the exact way that we want to do this, because this is going to affect the mobile application that we have. Okay, so for our endpoint name, we're going to call this tasks, and this is very important. It's lowercase because once again, this is just how our mobile app is going to talk to this app service endpoint. For our bucket, we're going to use the ToDo bucket, and for our scope, we're going to use the data scope. You can see here we have a list of collections that we can link to this endpoint. And you can have many collections in your application, up to 1,000 of it, it turns out, per scope. We have a very simple mobile application here, so we're going to select one to link. And then all we have to do now is click the Create App Endpoint button, and we'll have this endpoint set up. It does take a few seconds for an endpoint to initialize, so we're going to actually pause right here, and I'll be right back once it's up and running. And like that, my app endpoint comes up, but it's offline. And this is actually normal. An app endpoint will always come with offline status so that you make the decision when you want to bring it online. You may want to do configuration to your app endpoint before you bring it online, and that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to click on the tasks here, our new endpoint, to go through and configure it. To start out with, we need to go through and set up the access control and data validation script that we want to use. This is frequently called the sync script inside of the documentations. So I'm going to go through and I want to click on my linked collection here. I got this task link collection, and I want to add a script to this that will go through and add some security to the actual endpoint so that we can validate who can update documents and who can see documents. So let's click on tasks. You'll see here our data script already that loads in is a pretty basic one. It basically just sets all the documents to a channel called tasks. Now this video explaining the entire complications of how all the things you could do inside of this script with tasks, channel, and having multiple channels and all those kind of things are the scope of this video. I just want to get you up and running so you can play around with this demo app. Now, our documentation is amazing on this. So if you go to docs.couchbase.com, you can go through and read the documentation about the sync script and get more information about like how to do that properly. But for right now, I'm going to import from a file. And the good news is that all of our repos that we have for the conversion apps have a sync file already for you that you can just import in. So when I click import from file, I'm going to go through and select from my developer icon over here, Couchbase, and I have a realm folder. Now I have all the repos downloaded on my computer. If you're a Kotlin developer, obviously you'd be using the Kotlin repo. If you're a Maui or a .NET developer, you use the Maui. Or if you're a SwiftUI developer or a Swift developer, you're going to use Swift. For the sake of simplicity, I'm just going through and pick the first one on the list, which is Kotlin. They all have the same sync script. So regardless of which code you're using, whether you're using Android, .NET, or Swift, you're going to have the same sync file. It's always going to be the root of the code that you downloaded from GitHub. So I'm going to go ahead and click the sync script here. Now, if you're saying, Aaron, I don't know where this is. I found this video and I don't know what repo you're talking about. That's a good question. Let me show you these repos. So I'm going to go to github.com. And from github.com, I'm going to go to Couchbase Labs. So I'm going to go here and find Couchbase Labs. Now, I'm a member of this org. You can go to github.com and go to Couchbase Labs. Okay. and that will get you to the Couchbase Labs org. And then from here, you can just search for CBL dash. And when you search for CBL dash, you should see that we have a couple different of these CBL template applications for conversion. If you're a Maui developer, the CBL template app Maui ToDo is the conversion app for MongoDB Atlas. If you are a SwiftUI developer, we have our CBL Realm template app, SwiftToDo. And if you're a Kotlin developer, Android basically, you're going to use the CBL Realm template app ToDo for Kotlin. And then all you have to do from there is click on here, go to code. You can grab your code via HTTPS or SSH, however you like to pull code down, or you can just download it from a zip file. It's up to you. You can see here that sync file is in the root folder. So now that I have my file imported in, let's talk about what it does. So the first thing it does is that a document coming in is going to be the doc variable here inside of our function, okay? If you are updating a document, you're going to get the old doc and then the new doc with changes, so you can compare the two if you want. Metadata is for extended attributes, or they call this X attributes, out of scope of what we're currently doing today, and you'll see that there's no code in here that kind of checks that. It's an advanced feature, but you should look into it. It's pretty cool. Now, you'll see here, we're going to first make sure that a document has a owner ID in it. If there's no owner, we're not going to allow the document through because it doesn't have an owner ID. And the application kind of has this very specifically. When you log into the ToDo application, it requires a username and password. And then any new document that's created automatically takes the user of that application and assigns it to this field. Now, what we want to be able to do is make sure that only document owners can update a document, okay? So what we could do though is we could say the user, because the document owner ID field is the username field, right? So it's going to take the username that you're logging into app services with. Well, then we can just say, we're going to require the user of this. And now what will happen is that it's going to use that field inside of the document, and it's going to go through and say, hey, look, if you're not this user, you can't update this document. And this is a bonus level of security. And this is how security works inside of app services. You can go through and require users, or you can require roles. And RBAC is a wonderful way to do this. And app services does fully support role-based security, which is really, really nice. My favorite way of doing it, to tell you the truth. For the sake of simplicity in this application, we're converting, it really didn't have the need for role-based security. So we're going to keep it simple with a just require user instead of set up users and roles. Now we have here is a channel grad. This comes down to the security rules of this particular application. And this application, how it was originally written from Mongo, is that all users could see documents. So regardless of it, you can see either yours or everybody else's to-do lists. However, you can only update your own tasks. So to solve this problem of how can everybody be able to see all tasks, we assigned the document to a channel called exclamation point. And this is called the global channel, okay? And what this allows it to do is it's kind of like a public channel that anybody can see the documents from. So when any mobile application logs into app services and syncs information down, it's going to get all the documents inside of that particular bucket scoping collection that we created earlier. However, the ability to modify them is going to be based on the user that's logged in. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, if we scroll all the way to the bottom of the screen, and you want to click outside of the editor here so you can scroll the page itself, because this is also scrollable, there's a save button here. And we want to go through and save this script. When we save it, it's going to take a few seconds, but we should see here that our changes have been applied. Now, we need to go through and start our app endpoint before we can make users. So how we do this is, you can see here there's a resume app endpoint button here, and you could click this, but it's better to actually learn how to do it from the settings. So from inside of our app service endpoint here, we're on the security tab right now. We're going to click the settings tab. When we click the settings tab, there's a resume app endpoint button here. This is where you want to go through and click it, and this will bring our app endpoint online. Now it does warn us this could take up to 60 seconds. Most of the time it's pretty close to instant, but it could take up to 60 seconds. You can see here instantly my app endpoint is online. Now that means I could, technically speaking, connect to this app service. However, we haven't created any users yet. Without users, we can't connect. So let's go ahead and go back to the security tab and create some users. So you'll see here, we're back at the access control and validation screen. We're going to go ahead and click the app users tab here over on the left. Now you see here, we have no app users currently today. We need to create a couple. So I'm going to go ahead and create the app user by clicking that button. You'll see here we need some usernames and passwords. So I'm going to steal from the documents that we have inside the repo the username and password we're going to use. So the username we're going to use here, I'm going to cut and paste that in as demo1@example.com. And the password is going to be this password I'm going to paste in. Now, this is inside of the Capella document in that repo. There's a Capella document and it gives you an example password you can type in. However, note that password is in a repo on GitHub, which means everybody in the world will know that password. You can make this password whatever you want as long as it meets the Capella security requirements. You'll see here, I'm just cut and pasting that password from the repo. If you don't feel comfortable using that username and password, don't use it. Make your own username and password. It's perfectly okay. You're not going to hurt my feelings. In fact, you probably should use your own username and password. Maybe add a 3 to it. Maybe add a capital P at the end. Be adventurous. Add whatever you like. But the point is, remember that if you're going to use the password from the repo, remember that that's a password that's publicly available on the internet. And I just want to give you a heads up, right? So that you understand the security implementations of that, hopefully. I'm going to go ahead and click the Create App User. And we'll see here that we should have that app user up and running. I'm not going to save that app user password, but one thing I noticed is that it's disabled by default because I forgot to uncheck this box that says disable app user. I'm going to go ahead and click that box. I click back in the user, and now that user is active. When we create our next user, we'll remember to click that box. So I'm going to create another app user called, and this time it's not set by default. Not sure how that happened previous time, but Demo Gremlins got me again. But I'm going to go through and create our second user, which is our demo2@example.com. And I'm going to go through and just click the create app, make sure that this disable app user is not checked, and click that create app user. And now we have 2 users that we can use inside of Capella. Now, finally, how can we test this to make sure that this is actually working? And this is a good question. Well, we can go through and do this with the Connect tab. So if we go to the Connect tab here, you're going to want to know this because this is going to be the connection endpoint that you're going to use inside that mobile app, okay? Regardless if you're using Android, so if you're using the Kotlin example, if you're using Swift and iOS, or you're using Maui with the .NET platform, you're going to need to know this public URL connection. Now, I'm going to delete this endpoint when it's done. So I know that I'm sharing this on the internet. That's probably not a good idea. However, note, this will be deleted once the video is done. So I control my fate on that. You can copy this URL by clicking this copy button. And now inside of the code, you can go through and modify that code, which I'll have in another video, depending on what platform you're using, to explain to you how to use this. But you will definitely want to copy this and then watch the video for each specific platform to learn how do you modify the app. But to test this, you can actually use this same URL for testing to see whether or not this works with that demo user that we created. Now, how do you do that, Aaron? Well, I'm going to click that copy button again. I'm going to open a new tab in Google Chrome. I'm going to paste in this, and I'm going to change this URL right here. See where it says WSS? I'm going to change that to be HTTPS instead, okay? Now, when this happens, I'm going to call the endpoint for tasks. This is a REST API. And when I click this, it should ask me for a username and password. Well, now I can type in that username and password that I had earlier. So that demo1 user that I created, I can type that in and I can put my password in here. I'm just going to cut and paste that in so I don't have to type it in. Click sign in. And what we should see, and I'm going to say never here, we got JSON data here. You can see here that this is a data that says that the DB's name is task. We have an update sequence of 3, a committed sequence. We have a start time, a compact. This is telling us that the endpoint is up and running, and this means the mobile app can talk to it. This is a wonderful way to validate that the endpoint's actually working. Now, the final thing you could do is you can go through and look at Capella to see documents as they flow inside of there. So since we're already inside of Capella, we've got this URL copied. Let me show you how to do that real quick. So inside of Capella, I'm going to click the Capella logo here, and this takes us right back to the main home screen. From there, I'm going to go back into my to-do. So I'm going to click to-do here on my cluster. And I'm going to go back to data tools that we were here earlier when we went through and created the bucket for to-do. I'm going to click the documents tab instead. Now from here, you can see here, it's defaulting to the travel sample bucket. This is a sample set of data that we include with the application, but we could pull down this list and select to do. And from our scope, you can see here, here's data and our task is collections. You'll see right now, we don't have any documents yet. So because of that, we can't see them. But if we were to start the mobile application, create some tasks, we can click this button here to update the task list and see whether or not we see new documents as they flow in. And we'll do that in another video. So with that, I want to tell you, you're up and running like that. Look how easy that was. You got Couchbase Capella up and running. You got a bucket created. You got a cluster created. We got app services set up, and we have an app endpoint that we can point a mobile application to do sync now between the application and app services. So I want to thank you for watching this video. And if you go through and look at the playlist on YouTube, you should see that there are other videos depending on what platform you want. Click on that video for Android, Swift, or .NET to kind of go through and learn how to use the mobile app and what changes were needed in order to make that app convert and get it up and running with Couchbase Lite. I want to thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.